I am actually live broadcasting even now.
Across the World Wide Web, my friend.
Oh, you're so wonderful. I wanted to start today. I don't know if you watched it or not. You're usually very, very well informed, but I may need your help in searching for it so I don't mess anything up. So when I go onto a YouTube, do you already have one up that I can go onto?
That would be the right-hand computer.
Right hand
And
computer.
let me have it.
You do it.
Just watch. I'll
Watching.
go to any one of these, and you can click on YouTube right there, and then you can just do your search.
I don't see it. Whatever it was, it didn't show up. So
Okay.
not streamer, but studio. Yes.
Yes.
So I think I'm on the wrong one. Sorry about that. Oh, there you are. Okay. So I can get on there and my keyboard should transfer what I'm doing or no?
Yes.
Well, why won't my microphone do the same? And then I don't have to.
Maybe it will.
And then I don't have to call in.
We've never tested that, so
Yeah.
perhaps it will.
We might have to do that. Tommy
Very possibly.
Tuberville. I wanted to start today's show with his, if I can spell, Tommy Tuberville.
You're an attorney.
Decries.
You have a law license. You can spell.
Here it is. So if I click this, it will play. Yes.
As long as the blue pot is up, which it is.
Okay. So I'm going to click on it because I think we need to start with this. The entire thing for 15 minutes. I want people to listen to this. Okay.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the unwinnable war in Ukraine, which has already cost American taxpayers billions of dollars. Now, anyone who dares question the Uniparty's narrative on the war in Ukraine is obviously going to get criticized. That's okay. The media has been complicit in pushing this narrative. Think about, when was the last time you saw live footage on the ground in Ukraine? It's rare because Ukraine is losing and is losing badly. This comes after we just gave Ukraine $60 billion more of taxpayer money earlier this year to prolong this war. I think President Zelensky, a uniparty puppet, is here begging for more money on a campaign trail with Kamala Harris. It feels like he's here every other month demanding more and more taxpayer money. That's because he knows that the money spigot will cut off if Kamala Harris doesn't win in November. Look, this subject is too important to go unaddressed. Over the last several months, I've asked multiple high-ranking members of the Biden-Harris administration to articulate what it is trying to accomplish in Ukraine. Just tell us. Tell us what it'll cost and how we plan to achieve these results. Basically, I'm asking, what is our game plan? Not one official in this administration has answered my questions clearly. Not one. One of the most interesting responses I received was from Secretary Austin himself, Secretary of Defense. He says we want to see Ukraine remain a sovereign, independent, and democratic state that has the ability to defend itself in its territory and deter aggression. Okay. Secretary Austin continued, stating that it is the administration's goal to bring Ukraine into NATO while simultaneously blaming Russia for NATO's past expansion. Now, here's when the DC establishment really gets upset. I'm going to review a few undeniable facts about NATO's history. Predictably, the Uniparty will accuse me of spewing Russian propaganda. But these are the facts. That's what we have to go by. And we can't shy away from it. NATO was formed 75 years ago in 1949 as a defensive alliance to counter the communist Soviet Union. It was wildly successful in that it maintained peace through deterrence throughout the Cold War. NATO helped us win the Cold War and dissolve the Communist Soviet Union. When the Cold War ended in 1991, Ukraine instantly became the world's third largest nuclear power. Ukraine, following a series of negotiations, Ukrainians agreed to give up their nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees from both Russia and NATO, territorial integrity, and political independence. These efforts were successful because they included assurances by many heads of state, including our own, that would no eastward expansion of NATO towards Russia ever happen. It was over. At that time, there were 16 NATO members. Today, 33 years later, after this agreement, there are 32 NATO members, even though in 1991, we agreed to no more eastward expansion. We broke the agreement. We, NATO, and the United States. NATO has expanded eastward 7 times since that agreement in 1991. The largest expansion in 2004 included 2 countries that share a border with Russia, Estonia, Latvia. Today, NATO includes 3 countries that border Russia. 6 NATO members are former Warsaw Pact members. The bulk of this expansion happened before Russia annexed Crimea and invaded part of Ukraine in 2014. Again, these are all the facts. All play a part in the NATO story and Russia's response to it. Here's another fact. NATO's expansion was on NATO's terms, separate and apart from any Russian input or activity. Let me read that again. NATO expansion was on NATO's terms, separate and apart from any Russian input or activity, contrary to Secretary Austin's claim. Ask yourself, how would the U.S. react if China or Russia entered a mutual defense organization with Mexico or Canada? How would we react? What if they started basing troops or participating in military exercises just miles from our homeland? Having covered a brief history of NATO, let's ask logical follow-up questions that we should always ask before involving ourselves in any armed conflict. First, how far are we willing to take this proxy war with Russia? How far are we? Did we think about that before we got into this? Are we committed to winning as Russia's president is, Vladimir Putin? Are we committed to winning? What happens if the momentum turns? What happens if it turns against Ukraine and Russia starts making real gains, as it appears is happening today? Will the U.S. send more taxpayer money, more weapons? Will NATO send troops? Will the United States send troops? What's the plan? War is a serious business. We should understand that by now. You don't half-ass your way into one, and certainly don't half-ass your way out of one. That doesn't seem to resonate around here. Since the Russian offensive began, we have sent more than $174 billion taxpayer dollars to Ukraine, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Recently, the Biden-Harris administration announced their intent to send an additional $700 million taxpayer dollars to Ukraine in cash. Are you kidding me? Why on earth would we give cash to the most corrupt country on the face of the planet? So after all that, after the last 2.5 years of funding billions of taxpayer dollars, getting hundreds of thousands of people killed, what do we have to show for it? The war has only gotten worse Hundreds of thousands are dead. Ukraine is becoming more desperate as its forces are engineering widespread insubordination and even mass desertion. We don't hear that on TV. We don't hear that in this propaganda media. Over 6 million Ukrainians have fled the country, have run, have left their country. Ukraine is playing with fire, now seeking to conduct offensive operations deep inside Russia. Why? You can't win. Most recently, Ukraine launched a drone attack that struck in Moscow. What are we trying to do? Start World War III? Most recently, Ukraine launched a drone attack, struck several other office buildings in Moscow. Adding to the uncertainty of this situation, this administration, current policy towards Ukraine has all the hallmarks of every Biden-Harris foreign policy decision that has preceded it: weak planning, disaster results, zero leadership. This administration never considered the consequences of Ukraine losing. How can that ever happen? This is really sad. It's sad for the United States of America. It's sad for the taxpayers. It's sad for our military. It's sad for our allies, and it's sad for NATO. Some of the Democratic colleagues have said Joe Biden never made a correct decision in foreign policy in 40 years. Well, they hadn't broke that. Biden-Harris administration has dumped billions of dollars also into the lap of Iran. Removed the terrorist designation from the Houthis, who, by the way, we're fighting against right now, but they're not terrorists. Alienated one of our most important friends, Saudi Arabia, and they've executed a disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal that unnecessarily cost the lives of Americans. All this weakness was a direct signal to our adversaries. Now's the time to make your move. And that's exactly what our adversaries, China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea, are doing. China today tests another ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean. They're preparing. Russia now has pounced on Ukraine. Whatever you hear in the media is not true. It is a slaughter. Iran has released its proxy and terrorized the Middle East. Our ally Israel is fighting for its life against Hamas following the gruesome October 7th attack almost a year ago. The Houthis are a bunch of people that live in the mountains, have been emboldened to attack ships, which has negatively impacted global trade. We can't even beat the Houthis, and we're trying to create more wars. China has stepped up its aggression in the China Sea. We're losing influence across the globe, especially in South America and Africa, where the Chinese and the Russians are taking over. We're leaving leaps and bounds. So let's be very clear. Despite the administration's incompetence, I still believe Putin was wrong to invade Ukraine. I think we all do. He should have withdrawn his forces immediately after it started. Putin is responsible for his actions, and he has made no secret of the fact that he sees Ukraine as historically a part of Russia. At the same time, I do not think that Ukraine's border is more important than ours. Not even close. Which we have been completely neglecting the last 3.5 years. We have been overrun. Southern border, northern border, and from airplanes all over the world flying into our cities. It's an embarrassment. We do not need the administration to enable Ukraine to use offensive weapons and strike deep into Russia. That cannot happen. We are on the cusp of a nuclear war. Nobody seems concerned. It won't happen. Yes, it will happen. Putin has told us it will happen if you continue this. This would only escalate this conflict to an entirely new level that none of us can ever imagine. Do you think this offensive would convince Putin to come to the table and negotiate a peace agreement? Well, I would hope we would go, but we do not seem to want to make a peace agreement. We had better. and we better do it in the very near future. This will provoke him even more deadly weapons if we continue to attack within their borders, costing more and more lives. NATO and the U.S. would be forced to respond as a result. We're trying to create a war. We must consider these questions thoroughly before we involve ourselves in another one of these crazy conflicts that should never happen. Improvising won't cut it. Now is the time for the U.S. to lead and negotiate a peace to the end of this bloody war. I keep hearing people say, well, we're building equipment for our military. Yeah, right. Or our men and women are not losing their lives. We're getting close to it. We're getting very close. Now look, I come from a military state in the state of Alabama. We build everything. We have thousands of troops. I want it to be well funded and well equipped if we ever have to fight a war. We need a lethal killing machine to deter other aggression. That's what a military is about. This is not about defunding our military. I want our military laser focused on protecting Americans and not woke DEI initiatives. And it's not about abandoning our allies either. We need to support our allies. It's about this administration's funding a proxy war with no plan, zero, no plan on how to stop it or how to win it. Biden-Harris administration needs to negotiate a peace agreement now, immediately, or there will be huge, disastrous consequences coming in the very near future. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
All right. Well, I wanted to play that entire Senate appearance by Senator Tuberville because finally someone somewhere in a position of importance has spoken the truth about what is really going on, how it began, what led us there, other than political commentators, you know, like myself. Like you can say a lot for RFK Jr. too. He has spoken the truth since the beginning, and there are other people. I just mean someone who might have the capacity to do something about it, or to influence people, or to say something. And I thought the key takeaways from that were some of the same things that people have been saying all along, that people who know better, like me, have been saying all along. Ukraine is extremely corrupt. Ukraine, the money, even the money that does get there, that gets past American corruption and American arms manufacturers, and gets through American politicians that all take their cut. When it finally does get to Ukraine, there's a large group of people that take their percentage. Everybody gets their percentage. Everybody, and everybody's doing it. It's not like anybody's alone in that respect, but it's extremely corrupt over there. A lot of the things that we are providing are not getting over there. $174 billion. And he said a couple of times in that appearance, what do we get? What are we getting? Not that war should be about what we are getting. He didn't say a whole lot about protecting democracy. He could have gone on a whole, uh, little. I don't know what you'd call it. He could have veered off into another section of his speech. Maybe he didn't have time, or he could talk about democracy, which doesn't exist over there. There is no democracy in Ukraine. Even what little may have existed before is gone. It's martial law now, and everyone knows. And today it happened. I haven't seen it yet. I honestly haven't had time to go through today's uh, videos, news appearances, and things of that nature, because um, those Zelensky was supposed to appear today and talk about what occurred, talk about his victory plan, as he calls it. And people don't know what that victory plan is about, but if you've watched, like I have, the last day or two of the UN appearances, which I'm going to get into a little bit here too, they're all great a great amount of news occurred in the last couple of days, especially in relation to what's going on in Ukraine. And it's important that we know about this. I'm not alone in formulating these ideas and putting them together, but I have my own specific take on it. I listened to all of these appearances. Zelensky appeared and spoke in English at the UN Security Council, and perhaps, and his appearance wasn't that long, but I don't think I will play Zelensky's appearance. There might be a couple of little uh, snippets that I'd like to, but I don't want to go searching for them in what he said when he appeared in front of the UN Security Council. I also watched his, and if you have the chance, perhaps you can do a search for ABC interview of Zelensky and his wife, which I think took place on Monday of this week, might have been Tuesday, and then do a search for it because they're both in English or mostly on the interview that he did with him and his wife on ABC. There was sometimes he spoke in English and sometimes he spoke in Russian or Ukrainian. I don't remember which, but it had to be interpreted either way when he was doing it, and so uh, and it was very interesting. They didn't talk anything about the current status on the ground in Ukraine, the current situation in Ukraine, and the same thing is true of his appearance in front of the UN. Now, anybody who knows anything about this knows that Zelensky is not very popular right now in his own country. There are some polls that suggest that it's about 60-40 against him now. The ABC interview spoke about when he came over the first time a couple years ago, and the same interviewer was interviewing him, that things were different back then, and they were talking about it. I want to talk about a few of the points as I go through some of the things that I've watched and researched in the last couple of days, specifically regarding the war in Ukraine and how. And but listening to Tuberville, you would think if other people are finally listening, that maybe public opinion would be changing. And JR said a couple of things during his program. I managed to listen to 90% of it while he was on there, talking about some of the current events and the money being sent to Ukraine, and whether we're getting what we bargained for, and the fact that if you want more of the same, if you want it to continue, if you want the potential and the possibility that our own young men and women are going to be sent to fight in Ukraine, and that Zelensky is here trying to ensure that that happens to save his own skin. The only way he will stay in power, literally, the only way that Vladimir Zelensky can stay in power is to to up the ante, to make it tougher, to increase the war, not reduce it. Peace does not help him. Peace does not help Vladimir Zelensky. Just doesn't, and everybody knows it, and it's clear wherever he goes. He's had he had his own he had his own peace conference several months ago. Didn't invite Russia. Had his own plan for peace at the time, And I assume it'll be very similar to what he had here. It was shortly after we gave him 60 billion, and you heard Tuberville say, what did we get for the 60 billion? Nothing. What did we get for the 110, 112, or whatever it was that we sent last year in time for we sent the 60 this year in time for them to do their great counteroffensive, right? Remember, back in May, we were talking about getting the great counteroffensive. Now, Zelensky's over here blaming us for the fact that their great counteroffensive never got off the ground, that their great counteroffensive failed to yield any results. I mean, none. And in fact, they're losing. And Tuberville said, if you don't realize they're losing by now, he didn't say you have your head in the sand, but that's pretty much what he was intimating, that you have no idea what's going on. And he did mention, whatever you're seeing in our news, cannot believe it. And I've been saying that for quite a while now. You just can't believe it, because they don't show what you're not seeing anymore, what you really are not seeing. You aren't seeing any battlefield reports. None. You have to go out and search kind of hard for them, or try to find them on Telegram, try to find them on even TikTok, or Russian sources. You got as I talked about in one of last week's programs, you've got the Attorney General's office filing criminal charges against Russia Today, RT, the channel RT, to stop them from broadcasting, in my view, the truth. It's an opposing perspective, of course, but if you listen to the numbers put out, and I'm not saying I absolutely believe these numbers, but I've been watching them for a long time, and the same general, I forget his name, the same Russian general has been putting out a report every single day about the war in Ukraine, and they list what is what Ukraine has lost. They list it, and they tell you how much has been uh, lost by Ukraine. Yesterday's said this: since the beginning of hostilities in uh, Russia's borderline regions, it means the Donbass, Ukraine's losses have amounted to more than 17,000 troops. This is just in Kursk, 130 tanks, 62 infantry fighting vehicles, 95 armored personnel carriers, 812 armored combat vehicles, 514 other vehicles, 138 artillery pieces, 31 multiple rocket launcher systems, including 8 HIMARS US and 6 US-made MLRS systems. So you get that every day. They put it out, and then they put the totals of the entire war, and then tell you what yesterday they say in the Kursk region. Just yesterday, Ukraine lost 300 troops. 300 troops. How many armored vehicles? 7 armored vehicles, including 2 German-made Leopard tanks, an infantry fighting vehicle, 3 armored combat vehicles, 2 artillery pieces, and 6 other vehicles. Now, you can watch that every day if you like. I mean, they do put it out. It used to be on YouTube also, but of course, YouTube has blocked anything Russian, and you can't get any news from Russia Today that tries to put a different perspective or different news out there. You don't get any of it, and you're not permitted to hear it. And I don't mean to make light of it, but people are losing their lives on a huge level. And so the second point I want to talk about is Zelensky's trip here, which is basically his gasping breath trying to be saved somehow, trying to save his power for himself. And Laura Ingraham did something, and I'm going to paraphrase what she said. I'm not going to play her whole. It was like a 10-minute, 6-minute, 7-minute. I don't remember 6-minute chunk on what Zelensky did when he first came over here. This was a couple of days ago when she was complaining about or mentioning the fact that he's over here campaigning for Kamala Harris. And there's a video of this. You should go watch it, of Josh Shapiro signing weapons, signing missiles, signing them to be sent over to Ukraine and fired into Russia. And so that's what our political and governmental leaders are doing right now. They're waiting for the next level, waiting to up the ante, waiting to give Ukraine more money, but they know full well it will make no difference. They cannot change the realities on the battlefield. Let's assume, uh, you talk, let's assume that we give them the ability to fire deep inside of Russia. Do you think that firing deep inside of Russia and blowing up anything other than electric infrastructure, uh, which if they do that, it's a huge mistake. You know, they're attacking. Uh, they're attacking a sovereign nation. Right now, there's a territorial fight, and this is what they're fighting over. Arguably, they did it into the Kursk region, and in that region, they have not received the U.S.'s blessing to fire U.S. long-range missiles into any of that area. Now, arguably, they're still breaking any sorts of norms as far as war goes because they're using our weapons, and according to Russia, there are a lot of naomniki, is the word is mercenaries. That these mercenaries are from the U.S. That allegedly they're still receiving U.S. military paychecks as advisors, and then uh, uh, they have to be the ones to put in the fire missions. And so Zelensky comes over here, does his interview, the two interview parts. The first one was his interview with ABC, in which he focused on. She was asking him. She knew he wouldn't give out his entire victory plan. That's coming today after he meets with Biden, which may have already occurred, and I just haven't seen it yet. Haven't had time to go into it. But his interview, where he focused on several different things. Number one, the first thing he focused on is that Ukraine can still win, is what he says, which I disagree with. But this is what he says: they can still win, and the U.S. should continue to fund and support them by giving them advanced weapons, giving them more money, giving them more of everything. Uh, and that they can only win from a position of strength. And he wants instant NATO membership, which, by the way, is not going to happen. There's too many countries who will not support that are still in NATO. And he badmouthed a couple other countries, measure, said that uh, Iran and China are helping, and North Korea are helping Russia, uh, and said that, well, I believe they are buying weapons from there, and that is seems to be, when I go and look into it, it does seem to be that they're buying weapons from there. But Ukraine doesn't have any of its own weapons. They're buying them all and receiving them all, either as gifts from other countries because it's a proxy war, or they're buying them on loan. But several countries have cut them off recently, and this is very recent. GR spoke about Viktor Orban, and his troubles, and he's gone, not troubles, but what he's done that's troublesome to other NATO members is that he's openly saying, "Look, we're going to need Russia in the future. There's no reason for this. We shouldn't be backing, at least to this level, and we should be encouraging peace somehow." Zelensky says the only way to get peace is to force Russia to do something. If you've watched Vladimir Putin as long as I have, you aren't forcing him to do anything. It's not going to happen. You have to convince him. And how are you going to convince him? Like Tuberville said, we have lied to them for how long? Since 1991. We're going on 30 something years. I was in the I was a diplomatic interpreter at that time, had a diplomatic passport, and I can tell you, I remember what we said when we allowed um, Germany to be united, and said, not 1 inch further, not 1 inch further to the east. We will not do it. But as Tuberville said, we've done it 7 times since then. 6 before Putin ever went into the Donbass area. And so Zelensky being over here and trying to encourage and getting, it appears, more money from the United States. Maybe the decision to allow it last night, and we don't know the answer to this yet either, because the presentation of the victory plan, if you want to call it that, of Zelensky hasn't been. It may have by now, like I said, but last night it hadn't been it had not been presented first to Biden. But according to Zelensky, he has to go from the point of strength, and we have to force Russia to do it. Well, I don't know how they intend to force Russia to do it, and they're losing on the battlefield. And I don't believe that even if they are given the ability to bomb deep into Russia, that they're going to get the ability that it's going to yield any results. But yesterday, Biden, after anticipating what's going, he says he wanted to repeat, we stand with Ukraine. He said that several times, and that he has a plan of what he's going to give to Zelensky after the presentation today. I'm interested to see what that is. I don't know what it is yet, but it'll be coming, and we'll talk about that another time. But keep your eye on it, because you should see what they're giving. They've already said that they intend to give another 750 million, something like that, 725. I can't remember the exact number, but they plan to put that money into Ukraine. The second thing that they've talked about on the ABC interview that was important was they wanted to accuse, and they've done this for a good year and a half now. They wanted to accuse the U.S. of stealing. U.S. wanted to accuse Russia of stealing some 40,000 children. That's what he said in his interview on ABC. If you get a chance, you might want to watch it. Said that these children have disappeared. Now, this is an interesting dispute, and I know some of the details, and I don't take a position on it one way or the other, but I tend not to believe it, because there were several orphanages that were just left, and the kids were left in them. Russia claimed in the very beginning that they went and took over some of these uh, uh, abandoned, or what do you call it? The children were abandoned too, and they took some of these children and took them into Russia. Some with parents, some without. Some from some of the places. Now, yesterday, another piece of important news. Before I get to Zelensky on the floor of the UN in New York, uh, early in the morning yesterday, and you see it on the news here as if um, Russia is lobbying threats to the United States. You might be able to take some of the things he said as a potential threat. That is not exactly what happened. And if you listen to what he said in Russian, he has a daily meeting, and this one happened to be put out on one channel or another. I don't remember which one it was, but it was Putin's briefing, and he was talking about the new policy with respect to nuclear reactions in Russia, and a change that they were making. Now, for years, back when I was in the diplomatic corps, back when I was an interpreter, the nuclear policies of both the United States and Russia were pretty similar. Both had more of a deterrent strategy and not an attack strategy. Their deterrence was that and Putin has spoken about it for a good long time, that we use nuclear weapons. We're not first strike, and the U.S. is also generally not first strike. I haven't read the policies anytime recently, but way back when, both of them were. We reserve the right to be a first strike, but that is not our policy, and we intend to use nuclear defense as a last resort, and we will only do it if we're attacked by another nuclear power, meaning we won't use nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear country. So the only nuclear threat would be against a nuclear country. Well, yesterday, Vladimir Putin signed a policy memo changing that stance. And what he said was, and this is specifically to say something about the potential of the U.S. giving Ukraine the ability to bomb with U.S. weapons, which have to be programmed by U.S. personnel, which have to be directed with U.S. assets in space, satellites, and things of that nature, which have to be the intelligence that comes from targeting is all American, maybe NATO, but 90% of it is American. That we have the ability these are U.S. weapons, and he's said repeatedly for a good month now, we consider anything that we consider this a proxy war. He said that for 2.5 years, but he's also said that this proxy war will be escalated dramatically if you allow Ukraine to use long-range weaponry of the United States, long-range missiles, which can only be programmed by the U.S. in Russian territory. And we will respond. And we won't necessarily respond only in Ukraine. Maybe we'll blow up things in Europe. Maybe we'll attack U.S. troops in Poland. Maybe we'll attack other places. Yesterday, and this is how close we're getting we're closer to nuclear war than we've ever been in my lifetime. That's for sure. And the response from Putin, which I don't judge it good, bad, indifferent. In fact, it's bad for us all because we keep playing brinksmanship. We are pushing a man that and waiting for him to do something so that we can turn around and blame him for escalation of war. And that is the entire policy of the U.S. We'll keep poking him and poking him and poking. We'll keep on poking until he does something that we can claim, look, we have to go in now. And we have to commit our troops now. We have to send in young American men now. We have to uh, fight them on Ukrainian soil now, which right now we don't need, don't want, and there's no profit in it. We don't get anything out of it. The whole statement is, what are we fighting for? Democracy that doesn't exist in Ukraine. It's not a protection of democracy. Whether it was Lavrov, I think it was Lavrov yesterday in his press conference, he said, listen, here's what you're fighting for. You want to know why Boris Johnson turned this, denied Zelensky, who, by the way, is the one that entered his own decree saying he cannot negotiate with Russia to resolve this conflict. He can't do it. It would be against the law for him to do so because he signed his own law doing it. But when they had settled this all out 2 months after this war started in April of 2022 in Turkey, and there was a memorandums of understanding already signed by parties. This has been put out in many different sources. It's not news, as everybody has known for 2.5 years now, that Boris Johnson went and said, no, 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 we can force Russia to its knees militarily, and Ukraine, you're going to be the one that forced them to do it, and we will support you to the end. Nobody, if Johnson didn't know then that what he was saying was complete BS, he certainly knows by now. And if anybody believed what he said then, of course, not everybody knew then that he was the one that said, and the U.S. with U.S. backing, of course, is that we can't give this up. But Lavrov said yesterday in his news conference, he said, we all know why the U.S. and uh, Great Britain wanted this war to continue and must win. It's because Great Britain has pumped so much money into Odessa. The plan was to have a deep sea port in Odessa for England, and a port. I want to say it was on the in Crimea. They wanted to take back Crimea, and on the U.S. side, the U.S. was going to open another port in the Crimea. And you're gonna like Tuberville said. Imagine Russia coming over and saying that we're going to have uh, a partnership militarily with Canada or Mexico. You put a U.S. port in Crimea, where Sevastopol has been a navy port for the Russians for 400 years. You got war coming, and the U.S. is so arrogant and England and Johnson specifically and Biden specifically to think that they can bring Russia to its knees that way. It's not going to happen. And Zelensky is the puppet that they used to attempt to get this done, and he's killed, according to Russian numbers, 650 to 700,000 of his own people, and wounded probably a similar number. And he has nobody left to throw at it. So the next question is, if what do we get out of this? Let's say there goes another 700 million going to be sent to him in cash. That'll be gone to fund Zelensky's next villa somewhere for when he gets booted out of office. Because I've always said that at some point, uh, I thought pre-election, and it may still come. It depends on what Biden says today. That they will push Zelensky out of power, and he will be the one that they blame everything on. And Zaluzhny or somebody else, maybe that Arestovich guy, will be put into place to be the next savior and keep the war keep the war going, but without Zelensky. Or they use it as a way to attempt to save face and back off and still try to. Then they'll start to try to negotiate and keep something about Ukraine in NATO, which I don't think is going to happen either. Russia is not going to allow that to happen, and I think Russia is going to be bargaining from a position of power when it comes to that. And Tuberville admitted that. Okay, well, I did want to get to some of the other interesting news, and the part two of that was Zelensky's appearance in front of the UN, where he expanded on what he was saying. And this is English. You can go and listen to his in English. He did it in English, and he read it in English anyway. And he threw some insults at the Russians that were in the room. He again said that nothing about prior to 2022. According to him, this war started in 2022 when Russia invaded, or according to him, invaded. According to Russia, they were assisting people, assisting after a referendum in the Donbass regions, and uh, he ignored any of the prior history, any of the NATO discussion, like what was said by Tuberville. When you don't like the news, when you do not like the facts, as you hear often on the Democratic side, and when it's war, too many times you hear it on the Republican side too. They're all very much for war, and they want to keep that gravy train rolling. Uh, and you don't hear the truth, and so you just ignore it, and hopefully that means it doesn't exist. But it does. And the truth is that this war began long, long before uh, 2022. And in my view, even long, long, long before 2014 and way before the Minsk Accords. It started when, in the 90s, we kept expanding because, in our view, we knew that Russia was in turmoil and that we just kept pushing while they couldn't do anything about it. And now the reverse has happened. And so Zelensky being over here to beg for more, which is, his stock in trade. And this time he brought his wife with him to help him beg and maybe look like, I don't know what, proper leaders. He doesn't look like a proper leader. It'd be nice if the guy wore a tie once. It seems to me that if he took something seriously, maybe he'd be a little better presented. Uh, he's always dressed as if he's just wandering in from the battlefield. And, that is not the case. You can go back and watch videos of him high, drunk. You can find him. You can watch his comedy shows out there. It'd be different if, and when he was being elected, he wore a suit and tie all the time. And he changed that when he wanted to be the I don't know what, the wartime president for Ukraine. And I don't know. I don't really concentrate all that much on dress, but it's a formal meeting. It's the UN, for God's sake. Go in there like you intend to be a professional world leader, but he's not. And by the way, I don't think that he ever has been. He's been a U.S. puppet, and that is for certain. And that is continuing until the administration is done with it. Now, when he got in whether in he's had a couple of interviews, he's done his campaigning on the Harris side. He attempted to meet with Trump after he badmouthed Vance and said that Vance uh, doesn't know what he's talking about, and Trump cannot stop this war. He doesn't know how to, and he says, if he can get peace, tell him how to do it. I know how to do it. Geez, I could do it, and I'm nobody special, but I know how to do it. Cut you off. Cut off Ukraine. The war is over relatively quickly, or ignore them completely and go settle this war with Putin ourselves. That would be a smart move. You don't need Zelensky to settle this war. You could tell Zelensky what to do. He's your puppet already, and so we could tell him what to do, and force force his hand money and with weapons, and we could say we will not put NATO in. If people had listened to Robert Kennedy for years, he said the same thing. If they had listened to uh, I don't know, uh, any non-expert, any person who was in the know like me, and I'm nobody special, but all of their experts have been incurably wrong for years and years and years, and only tell the so-called elites what they want to hear, pumping this sunshine into places where it shouldn't be pumped, uh, to convince them that Russia is a pushover, that you can continue to abuse them and nothing will ever come of it. Well, I think that theory has been debunked, and it came from people. Do you remember when was it Obama who said to Mitt Romney, the 80 when Mitt Romney said that Russia was the biggest threat, and he said the 80s are calling, they want their foreign policy back. Well, I'm telling you now, the 80s are calling and they want their foreign policy back because the Russians are not weak. Their military is not weak. Their military industrial complex is not weak. Their leadership is not weak. Vladimir Putin is probably more popular than he's ever been. Does everybody love him? Nope. Do they think he's done what's best for Russia? For the most part, yes, they do. And has that place, Russia, changed dramatically since the 90s when I first went there? Oh yeah. And you can look at these videos all you want. There are lots of stories of Americans in Russia in English that are transmitted in English. Go on YouTube and look for American in Russia and you'll find them. And you can see some of the things that you have, some of the projects that they have going on. We should be extremely jealous of. And some of the trade initiatives they have going on are just incredible, and some of the things that they are talking about. I don't do what JR does to take a break at the top of the hour, at the midpoint of the hour. I just keep on babbling. And so, but I would note that it's now in Missouri, the 5 o'clock hour. And I wanted to give a plug to the other shows that are coming up, but I'll do that at the end of the show. I got about another half an hour to go. And I wanted to tell you what's coming up here. Uh, and uh, how Putin changed the um, his policy on nuclear reaction, how they're going to react in a nuclear fashion, or how they plan to, which you could take as a threat. That part needs to be uh, uh, outlined as well, because they did change the policy, and this is a big deal. And Americans, uh, normal Americans, I like to consider myself fairly normal American. I just happen to listen, get my news 50-50 from Russian speaking sources and US sources, and try to get a pretty broad range of it. But the change in policy is this. What he signed and said he was doing in this policy is that the threat of a non-nuclear country attacking Russia with the assistance, with the arms, with the technology of a nuclear power against Russia, and he made sure to outline, against Belarus, white Russia, against their ally, Belarus, either of those two, they will consider it, an attack against their territorial integrity. And one of the responses may be a first strike on a nuclear level, that they may do it. So their policy has changed. And I haven't checked our policy in a while. I intended to before I got to today's show on that, but I will look it up for the next time. I've been a little bit on the busy side, uh, and wanted to talk about it. Now, Zelensky, when he came over, he told some blatant falsehoods. Said that Russia has been targeting nuclear infrastructure, nuclear power plants. Russia did take over a nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia region, forget the name of it, but that they took it over. There are news sources, some of them Ukrainian, that say the Ukraine was trying to bomb the one in Kursk in Russia, on the Russian side. They were definitely trying to go up there, allegedly. Well, who knows? Never heard the actual stories about why Kursk was important. But one of the first excuses we heard for why Kursk was important for Zelensky was that there was a nuclear reactor in the Kursk region, and they wanted to go up and take it to make up for the fact that they had lost the nuclear reactor on the Zaporizhia side, and to force Russia to its knees and come back militarily. Well, that didn't work out. Well, then there were several other reasons for why they were going to Kursk, that they wanted a buffer zone. Um, all of them have been debunked. Everything that he said about the reasons to go to Kursk, including his own command staff saying that it was his choice, never should have happened, and them saying, "Hey, that I didn't make that decision; somebody else did," meaning Zelensky made that excuse for why he was going to go into Kursk. That came up. So all of these things have come to a head with Russia now. They, the one-upsmanship isn't just on the U.S. side. We're the bigger culprit, if you will, that we keep pushing it and expanding it and making it bigger. And I believe they're doing that to force Vladimir Putin to do something. I don't want to call it colossally stupid, but something that should not happen. And that means a nuclear blast somewhere. That would be a mistake. certainly. And it would then give the US the time to say, well, geez, look what Putin did. But they're trying to goad him into doing it and have been trying to goad him into doing it. And they all say, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. They think they can do anything they want without response. I'm not so sure that is going to be true forever. I think long-range weapons being granted to be fired deep into Russia, I think that might give you a response that you really don't want. I think that would be a bad plan, and I'm not alone in that. You want a bigger expert that makes more money than I do. I'm sure there's plenty of them out there who would give you the same response that I'm giving you. There are plenty of them out there. Jeffrey Sachs is one of them, by the way. Haven't listened to him recently, but I remember him saying something similar not too long ago. So that is what I wanted to tell you in the first section of my show today, is to discuss all of the information that came up. And then I wanted to go through what else has occurred at this UN meeting. Now, there's been two main topics, and Ukraine has been somewhat overshadowed by what's been going on with Israel and Lebanon, and I won't go into that. I'm keeping with my area of expertise, and uh, I'm going to continue with the important other parties that spoke. And one of the surprise ones for me, now think about this, when all the news in America about the UN, about the meetings that have been going on this week, about Zelensky and his appearance, about him uh, campaigning with Kamala Harris, about everything that's been going on in this regard in New York, they have completely ignored another section or one. And if you had, it kind of makes me wish that everybody spoke Russian too, or that Sergei Lavrov had given his appearance in front of the group of 20 in English. His English is very good. He probably could have, but he doesn't. I mean, it's his option to do it in whatever language he wants. But if you get a chance, even if you got to read it in subtitles, you should go and listen to. I would have played it in English, but it's too distracting to listen to somebody when you do simultaneous interpretation, which I'm not capable of, especially on a technical level or on diplomatic level. I've never been capable of doing that. I can paraphrase everything that they say, and if we did consecutive interpretation, meaning somebody'd say a paragraph and then I'd interpret that paragraph back or whatever. But simultaneous people listen and spout it out at the same time in another language. I can't do it. Coordination doesn't go, just doesn't work. But it would be very interesting if you watched the Lavrov speech or read the transcript of it and tried to find it and listen to what Lavrov said. Because the important question of our time, everyone in the US is ignoring it. No matter what you think of the war in Ukraine isn't going to go on forever. It will end. And there will be a post war accounting of sorts. And this is what Lavrov was talking about. And if you're not, and this is far more important than anything that you've heard from any source, and we don't hear it. And no, it's not BRICS. It has something to do with BRICS. But boy, is you need to read his speech, whether you believe it or not. I tend to believe the things that he's saying. I tend to believe what the rest of the world literally is saying, except for our foreign policy gurus. I mean, our foreign policy has been run by who? Hillary Clinton before, and then Joe Biden, and then Kamala Harris, right? These are Blinken. And come on, that guy. Lavrov refused to meet with him. Said there was really no point in meeting with him. He doesn't say anything useful. He just wants a photo opportunity. I happen to agree. I happen to think that's true. What's he going to do when he goes? There's nothing to say unless you're. I mean, everybody's talking about this alleged victory plan of Zelensky, knowing that victory, no matter what the U.S. does, is still going to be quite elusive for Ukraine. Uh, uh, Many people have been saying since the start of this, Ukraine can't win. I'm one of them. And not because of anything other than the fact that they can't win. When you have a nuclear power